Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. AJ Hazy, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about a few things. We want to talk about this amazing brokerage that you started or that you've built and you're continuing to build. I want to talk about Advantage West, right? Academy. Let's talk about your property management. Let's talk about the fund that you run, right? For investors. Let's talk about the construction company you have. Let's talk about you as a parent, right? You have a 5-year-old at home, right? Let's talk about some of the amazing things that are going on in your life, but we'll get your life story on tape. Thank you again for being here, bud.
It's my absolute pleasure. And I really enjoyed the chat we had prior to hitting record as well. So I think this is going to be fun.
Yeah, we're gonna have a good time. So
Nice.
Where were you born?
I was born in Vancouver, Canada. I'm a Canadian. Yep. And my folks.
You're still there, right? Do you live up in the mountains?
I still live in British Columbia. We've moved to the interior. It's called a little town called Kelowna. It's a really beautiful resort town. My folks moved us up here. I think that's one of the best decisions that they ever made back in 1989. So most of my, childhood and certainly all of my school and everything was here in Kelowna, and it's been awesome. And I still have all my same elementary and high school friends. We're still all very close, and it's a small enough community where that can happen still. After high school, I went to Australia, did what was meant to be a gap year, turned into a gap 2 years. My big plan prior to that was I wanted to go to university on a scholarship for baseball. And then I had a pretty nasty snowboarding accident. You can tell we're Canadian because, snowboarding is like life besides hockey. And anyways, so I didn't end up going to school. I went and did the gap year, and I fell into a really cool groove in Australia where we were living in this little town called Byron Bay. For anybody that's been to the east coast of Australia, they'll know it. It's just a beautiful little haven. We realized there was 5 of us Canadians traveling together. We realized that we were spending way too much on hostels, like collectively, like $150 a night or more. So we went down to the letting agency as 18-year-old punks and wanted to rent this big, beautiful house near the water. And we were able to find one for, I think it was $3,500 or $4,000 a month, where all of us yahoos could live there, and it was cheaper. And so no more, shared showers and bunk beds. We were now all had our own bedrooms, and we were living by the beach. So what a cool period of time. And then as some of my friends moved on, went back to Canada because I stayed for so long, I eventually kind of became the manager of this house. The lease was in my name, and I got to the point where by subletting the apartments, I was able to live for free. And so I banked a bunch of money. I was DJing at the time, just being a surf bum, had really nothing to spend my money on. So I ended up accruing not huge money, but about 10 grand, which for, a young kid at the time was a lot of dough.
Yeah.
So then it came to pass that we got deported for overstaying our visas, me and my one buddy. So we had to hightail it out of there. And I remember phoning my dad. I think I was in tears. I just said, I don't know how I'm going to replicate this life I've created, like where I'm living for free. And he said, well, you're not going to come back and be a surf bum, but you could definitely still have the living thing for free. Sounds like you've got a little bit of money. Why don't you just buy a house with 5 bedrooms and do the same thing here?
Yeah.
I thought to myself, well, shoot, if I can do that. So I came back and started the process trying to buy a house. Turns out if you have no credit, that's not going to happen. So I had the money, but no credit. So I learned at 19 years of age, the power of the joint venture. And so this, would serve me well. My very first joint venture with a good friend of mine, we put his credit together and a little bit of his cash and my money. And we went and bought ourselves a house, did the same thing, rented out the rooms to some Yahoo buddies. And we had a ton of fun living in that house and lived for free and banked some more money. And that's what sort of launched both my real estate career and my investing career at the same time. So I became a realtor at 19, same thing. Had some early success, came through the 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6 run that everybody that's been, that's a little longer in the tooth remembers. Made some money. Yeah, we had some fun. We made some money. And then in 2007, I started my own, or actually, I should back up. In 2007, I had a plan to open up a brokerage, but no plans were in motion yet. And then I had a pivotal moment where I actually sold a house to two different parties. There was a competing offer situation, and one offer didn't reference the collapse of the first. So long story long, we ended up in a pretty nasty little battle where two parties believed they had legal right to buy the property, which created an exit situation where I got called in by the managing broker of Remax, and he said, "I got to let you go. You're creating too much heat." Um, so I had 30 days to come up with my own brokerage. So here I am, 25 years of age. I'm having some success. I'm driving around in a leased Aston Martin and thinking that I'm, God's gift to real estate. Next thing you know, I've got this majorly humbling experience happening where no brokerage would take me. That's okay. I wanted my own brokerage anyway. I go convince a buddy of mine who is the top guy at BMW in sales to get into real estate with me. And the two of us together created a boutique brokerage called Vantage West.
Right.
And so at 25, had my own brokerage. And then, of course, 2008, we know what happens. The market absolutely just folded on itself.
Yeah.
We went into that economic crisis. At the time, I thought we were dead, but it forced us to get good at what we do. It forced us to become very creative. And I was already, a big student of the real estate investment game. I had built a decent net worth to this point. And I thought, okay, well, we'll just specialize in this. We'll work with the investors. We'll learn the foreclosure game, and this is what we'll specialize in. And that's mainly how we made it through all that. Yeah, and then so we kind of came through that era. Met my wife kind of around the same period of time, and her and I built a pretty nice little real estate empire. We got into real estate developing a couple of years later together. She had already bought a couple of properties. We met at 25, and when I met her, she was working at a restaurant, but she owned two pieces of real estate and was looking to buy a third. And she was a good little saver, and so the two of us combined and really built something pretty great. And then got married when we were 30, and took 6 months off. Did a trip around the world. My brokerage was stable enough at that time to be able to sustain itself in my absence, which was pretty cool. It was like a little mini retirement. I had just read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, and he talked about mini retirements. So we took one. And it was awesome.
Love Tim Ferriss, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So came back from that. And then I hired a coach at that time to develop this concept that I had always thought was a better way to do real estate, which is the super team, the teamerage, basically. And so rather than, because what we had built, my partner Joel and I at that time, was just a mini replica of a Remax or a C21, which is, agents can come, hang their license, give a little, get a little, and, no real agreed upon standard of service, no standardization of anything, and no pooling of resources. And so I thought it was a very inefficient way to do business. Found a coach, and then convinced said coach to come actually from Toronto and be our director of operations for the next decade. And we took the business from doing about $1 million in revenue to 10 million in a very short amount of time. And so here we are today. Now we've got we're vertically integrated all the way through. We've got property management, we've got pre-construction sales, we have new home construction, we've got the fund that we run, and everything in between. And I get to spend my time kind of leading those. But what I'm really passionate about now is making time for my family and building this really cool lifestyle. I have one daughter, and we're one and done, so we're pouring ourselves into her and trying to be the best parents we can. And that's the story up to now. That's the quick version. Hopefully I didn't speak too quick.
That's cool. No, you're fine. So let's go back for just a second. So growing up, where you grew up in Canada, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
Well, when I look back now, I think about us as like free range kids, right? We were able to, there was no cell phones, there was nothing. I mean, that's everybody, but for us, because it was such a safe place, we could, after school, I could go walk to my friends' houses that were a couple miles away, and my folks just knew we'd get home when, we'd get home safe when there was just we just had a lot of, I'd go walk off into the bush for kilometers or miles away. We just had a lot of freedom, a lot of leash. I even prior to me getting my driver's license, I was funny story. My dad was in the car business. And so these wholesalers would learn that you could go to the dealerships on a Monday after they'd done all their, trade-ins for the weekend. You could buy cars for $1. And so I was buying these dollar cars and then flipping them to guys at my high school for $500 or whatever. And so I actually had an inventory of cars starting at age 14 or 15. I always had a little beater in the driveway, and my folks would actually let me drive that car up to my friends' houses up the way. Like, that's how safe of a neighborhood where we lived was, right? And there was barely any traffic. I wasn't allowed to go to the highway or anything, but I could putter around in the neighborhood, which just, you think of that today, there's no way.
Right.
But where we live is a really cool place. It's Four Seasons playground. You've got you've got ski mountains in the winter. You've got in the fall and spring just the most amazing golf courses and wineries. And we've got a lake that services 3 different cities. It's an 85-mile long lake that you can do tons of water sports and boating. So we grew up on jet skis and boating and playing at the beach. It was just a really, really cool thing.
That's cool. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Got to be my dad in the early days for sure. I had an upward view of his entrepreneurial spirit and his ability to put deals together and find opportunities and that. And so he was somebody that I think I really emulated and tried to be like and learn from.
Gotcha. So in high school, did you play
Mhm.
sports?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I was big into baseball. I played hockey as well. I was in different martial arts all the way through taekwondo, kickboxing, karate. And what else did I played on the volleyball team? Despite my short man status, I was what they call a back row specialist. But I had a hell of a serve, so they'd substitute me in for some of the kids that couldn't serve as well. And then by the time I got to the front row, get out of there, shorty.
Well,
So
you could dig like there was no tomorrow.
oh yeah, I was digging everything. I was digging and serving, but they wouldn't let me. And I could set, but they wouldn't let me go near the net because I couldn't block or spike. But yeah, so I played on the volleyball team all the way up through senior high, and I did play a year of basketball. But I tried to play everything. I played rugby for a year. We didn't have high school football. I think had we had high school football, I would have tried out for quarterback because that was always my favorite position to play when we played pickup games. So we played road hockey every day. Like, that's another thing, going back to your earlier question. Every day, me and my group of friends would either meet at the field and play football, or we'd meet on the street and play hockey. It was
Yeah.
literally daily that we would get together and play some sort of sport, and we'd play till the sun went down. And that was so common. And I don't see that as much these days. I don't see kids out. When I do, I love it. I love driving through that neighborhood and there's kids playing on the street. It never bugs me to have to slow down and creep through the street hockey game, because it gives me a little bit of faith that they're still doing this stuff.
Yeah, and it does happen, but it's just not as prevalent, like you're saying. They're spending all kinds of time behind the screen, and we need to kick them out and make them go do what you did when you were growing up. So of the sports you played in high school, did you have a favorite?
Well, I think the one that I took to the most was baseball, just because I started young and I was good. So I ended up on the all-star team and I ended up traveling. And so I think where you get the most attention and the best coaching and the best competition ends up being your favorite sport. Hockey, I
Yeah.
got in a little bit later. In Canada, hockey's the rite of passage. So I think I started at, age 10 or 11. And some of the kids that started earlier were already in rep. There's no catching these kids unless you're a dynamo, right? And I just
Yeah.
wasn't big enough to catch these kids. So I played house hockey, and it never ended up being for me like this major passion. But I played all the way through to the end of high school in hockey and loved it.
Gotcha. So in
Yeah.
high school, did you have a favorite sport, or pardon me, favorite subject?
Yeah, I was pretty good in math thanks to a grade 4 and 5 teacher. So the elementary school that I went to, they had this one teacher. His name is Ed Sturl, phenomenal teacher. And the thing that sticks out to me is every morning he would draw a grid on the chalkboard,
Mhm.
with a X and Y axis, and he would put numbers 1 through 10 in a randomized order on the X axis, and same thing on the top. And then everybody would have a little sheet of paper, and we would kind of write in what he wrote, and then he would say, "On mark, set, go," and then we had to fill in all the blanks on what the corresponding times tables were inside of the
Mhm.
grid. And then I remember being so competitive, and I would just slam my pencil down, say done, and it was, for me, I had to be first. And just getting that good at multiplication at grade 4 level has, first of all, made me a lover of math. But now looking back, like, in my life, people think I'm some sort of a math genius because I can calculate interest rates and commissions. It's just multiplication. It's just
Right.
knowing what percentage of this is this. And people look at me
Mhm.
like, how did you do that in your head? It's like, I've been doing this in my head since I was, in grade 4.
Right.
Right. And so it set me up. I actually sent Ed a message over Facebook a little while ago, and I just thanked him for
Yeah.
doing that and told him what an impact it had on my life. And I think he was pretty moved by it too. But yeah, math was definitely my favorite subject. And then as well, film and TV. I got into like an elective course in high school to do film and TV production. So I was up in the sound booth and playing with smoke machines and lighting, and I kind of liked all that. I liked setting the stage. I didn't want to be on stage. I wanted to kind of be creating the scene, which oddly enough, later I became a DJ, and so playing with mixing boards and sort of controlling the party, but without being the guy breakdancing in the middle. But having that sort of control was something that I really took to.
So it's amazing, isn't it, how a teacher can have that kind of impact on you?
Absolutely.
It's a real lesson in life, right?
Yep.
Like as leaders, we can have an impact.
Oh, 100%.
Right? That is something that changes people's lives and changes the trajectory of their life.
Yeah. I can't remember who said it to me, but the idea isn't to be the book, but to be a chapter in a lot of people's books, right? And so I sort of see that now, as agents come through our brokerage, or the people that I get a chance to coach for periods of time, I get to be a really cool chapter in their book and be that leader for a period of time and help them level up. And then the cool thing is, one day, hopefully, they look back and they go, "Oh, that was a pivotal moment in time. That leveled me up. That was something that it opened doors or impacted my life in a positive way." Right. So again, it's this idea of being a guide and being a chapter in people's lives. It's really cool and exciting.
Yeah, you take the opportunity to invest in them a little bit, right? And sort of, to an extent, interrupt their pattern, right? So when we talk about, you mentioned the Socratic method, and you mentioned it because I had mentioned it, right? But we're literally programmed out of the womb to answer questions. And if you don't think so, watch a 2-year-old that's throwing a tantrum. Walk up to them, get in their face and go, "What's wrong? What happened?" They'll stop. They'll stop crying. They'll stop being upset. They'll forget what it was they were upset about anyway. And they'll look at you and they'll want to answer your question. Right? So you can literally use questions to lead your children where you want them to go, to lead your agents where you want them to go, to lead your spouse where you want her to go. Okay. And it's a way to do it. It's more elegant. Okay. And the fact of the matter is, so when our firstborn, who's now 25, right? 25 years ago when he was born, gonna be 26 in a couple of months, they came to get me. And I was in the nursery with him, and the nurse came over and she said, "They need you in recovery stat." Okay. My heart sank, right? Something's wrong with my wife. She just gave birth to my son, had a C-section. Something's wrong. So I go in, and these two nurses are standing in the corner talking amongst themselves. And the only person in there other than them is my wife laying flat on a gurney.
Scary sight.
I walked in and I'm like, her eyes are closed, the whole thing. I walked in, I'm like, "What's going on?" They go, "She will not obey our commands." I'm like, "Well, there's your first problem.
Yeah.
You can't tell this woman to do anything." Right?
Right.
So I go over there and I grab her hand and I'm like, "Hey, can you hear me? Miriam, can you hear me?" Nothing. Like, "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand." Nothing. No eye movement, nothing. Okay. Now I'm really starting to freak out. And I said to her, I said, "Okay, in case you're having a bout of attitude, and no matter what I say, you're not going to respond, I have a question for you. You can't leave here until you raise your back end up physically off the gurney. Do you want to see your baby boy?" She didn't squeeze my hand. She didn't make a facial expression, nothing. Back end comes up off the gurney.
Crazy.
Okay. I turn around and I look at the nurses and they're like, "Well, we know we called the right person." Back to the nursery I go, right? But I had to ask her, right? It had to be her idea.
Yeah.
You with me?
Yeah.
You can ask questions to help people arrive at the conclusion they need to arrive at. Questions interrupt patterns, right?
100%.
So, and people tend to live in patterns. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I just came out of a training session. One of my new leaders was leading, and he was talking about exactly this, and his questions, which of course we as a group have decided this is the best questions to ask a client in the beginning, but like asking them what's changed in your life? What does this ultimately mean to you, this move that you're
Mm-hmm.
making, and then asking them what their fears or concerns are so that you
Mm-hmm.
touch on both linear, logical, and emotional type folks. Asking them what a 10 out of 10 looks like, what would be a
Mm-hmm.
step above that. So we have this sort of systematic approach to really get everybody to a level of clarity they weren't at before. So they
Right.
really understand what it is they want. They understand why they want it.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have enough information to properly lead them. Right.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about that was our whole session was based on asking great consultative questions
Yeah.
so as to help people self-discover what the best course of action for them is. And that's
Yeah.
that's an example of exactly what you were just saying.
So one of these days when your daughter is a teenager, she's going to come home and she's going to do things that outwardly suggest to you that she didn't have a good day.
Hmm.
And when you go to talk to her and you ask her, "Are you okay? What's going on?" She's going to say, "I'm fine," which is her way of doing the Heisman, right?
Heisman, yeah.
She's literally okay. The one thing that you can never do as a parent is let that win, because teenagers think that they have to do that to be cool.
Hmm.
Okay. And what they're doing is they're testing you as a parent. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
You have to, it's a battle of wills. Okay. And you have to be intelligent and experienced enough to be willing to stand your ground. Now,
Hmm.
it's going to frustrate her. Okay. But you have to be willing to stand there and keep asking.
Hmm.
Keep asking, right? Obviously, you're not fine. Talk to me about why you're acting the way you're acting. What is it that happened today that
Yeah.
caused you to come home in this mood? What is it? What's happening? You're reacting to something. Tell me what you're reacting to. What happens is they learn that they can't do that to you anymore.
Hmm.
Okay. And they will open up. They are dying to tell you what happened that day,
Hmm.
but they're testing you. And if you fail the test, you're going to go, whatever, and you're going to walk out the door. That's the
Nice.
easy approach, right?
Yep.
The difficult approach is no, 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 no. I'm standing my ground. I'm the parent here. I'm in charge. And you're going to tell me eventually, right? You're going to tell me what happened and you're going to tell me how you feel about it.
Hmm.
And every single time that that happens, they feel better afterwards.
Yep. That
Right?
makes
They don't
sense.
realize that they're going to, but they do because they
That's where
got it
being
out.
comfortable.
Yeah, they got it out, and you become just like you want to be that leader that people trust, just like you want to be that consultant that people trust, okay? You need to be that parent that they trust. You need to be that parent that they know that the other stuff that their friends pull with their parents
Doesn't fly
ain't
here.
ain't, ain't going to play here. It's just not going to play.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
So
Yep.
hopefully that helps you. But that's the Socratic method. The Socratic method is you literally stand your ground.
Hmm.
Okay. And you literally just keep asking and you ask every which way you need to get them to a point to where they can't say no to you.
Well, being persistent and even to the level of annoyance, my wife will tell you is one of my superpowers. So I'm
Yeah.
sure I'll be able to do that.
You're going to do
Um,
great.
you
You're going
tell
to
me
do
if you think
great.
I'm on the right track with this, Mike. But my daughter's only 4 at the moment, and so she
Right.
comes home from preschool, and rather than just asking her how her day was, because I was
Hmm.
finding I was getting some kind of lame responses, I ask her now to tell me something that what was the most interesting thing she learned that day. Then
Hmm.
I get her to tell me is there anything that made you sad,
Right.
and then I try to finish on a happy note. Was there anything that made you excited or happy? And
Right.
then, so I'm trying to kind of dig it into more of the emotional, make it a safe space for her to share
Hmm.
if there was something that she wants to be
Yeah.
vulnerable and tell me, yeah, so and she do. She'll say, so and so told me didn't want to be my friend anymore. And then I said, well, and I asked the next question, did that make you feel? That must have made you feel sad. And I said, well, were you friends the day before? Yeah. I said, really think you're going to be friends again tomorrow? And to get her, you know,
Right.
her mind around it, but unpacking it a little bit and kind of laying that groundwork. So hopefully, when I ask her down the road and I hold my ground, like you say,
Yeah.
she's well conditioned to know it's
Yeah.
a safe space to open up.
Yeah, and I told my kids when they were younger, I said, listen, when you become a teenager, you're going to test daddy's values. It's part of your rite of passage. Okay. You're going to test daddy's values. I just have to tell you this, you had better bring it.
On that note, that's awesome, by the way. On that note of values, this is one thing I haven't like. Did you guys as a family have like a very well understood set of family values, like
Oh, yeah.
something that, yeah. And
Oh,
how
yeah.
did you integrate? What was the way that you integrated it?
Well, every time we violated a value, we had a conversation. So let me ask you a question. What you just did. So I'm gonna share with you a script that I used. Okay. And I don't like scripts. I'm not a script guy, but this is something I used. When I was a kid, my my sister and I fought like cats and dogs. I mean, we went at it all the time. Okay. And it was not something that my mother or my dad necessarily discouraged. They just walked out the door. They just, let them have it. Right.
Mhm.
Well, we hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.